Hello, everyone. Welcome to BackTable Podcast. We are recording here from Barcelona with Peder Horner and myself. And exciting, to get to hang out with Peder. I haven't really hung out with you since Western Angio.
That's right. It's been a while.
Yeah, and that was the last time we did something like this.
Yeah, that's right.
With you and Sabine. And,
that's right. A couple of years.
Yeah, both cool places. We were in, Maui back then?
That was. And that was pre-pandemic.
That was pre-pandemic, yeah. And here we are 4 years later.
Yeah.
And we both still look the same age, I think. You know what I mean?
We look better. So much better. At least you do.
No, man. You're still... I was still early 40s, right?
That's right.
So, I wanted to do an episode with you about staff culture, because we talked about this stuff before. And, but before we get into that, I do want to talk about a little bit about so far, how's Barcelona been? Just create some FOMO for our audience, right?
Yeah. So we're here for CIRSE 22, and something I've been wanting to do for quite a while.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to come to CIRSE ever since I was I think when I was a fellow, I heard about it because John Kaufman was coming over here, and some of the daughter folks would come over to CIRSE every once in a, pretty regularly. So, and there was a big European connection with daughter and Joseph Roche. So they kind of put the bug in my ear, but it's been until now that I could actually make it happen.
Yeah, me too. I've always wanted, isn't it like every other year in Barcelona or something? It's kind of like Western Angio like that, or something like that.
Yeah, and then I think Lisbon maybe is the other city. Yeah,
which is also another amazing city that I want to visit. But yeah, I've also really wanted to come to CIRSE. And so far, this is day 3, walking around. I've mostly been in the exhibitors hall, but it's, I like the energy of it. It's similar to SIR.
It is good.
But not as many familiar faces.
Right.
I keep looking for people, and I'm looking at faces, but I don't recognize anybody. How about you?
It's good. Yeah. I've seen some people have come up to me that I had never met before. The Twitter phenomenon.
Yeah.
Which has been kind of cool to see that across the pond. A little bit different because every vendor has like a good espresso machine, and the baristas are pulling shots like crazy.
Yes. Yeah. I asked about that at the Argon booth. I was like, what's now, like a couple years ago, or maybe pre-pandemic, there was like one booth that would have an espresso machine. And they were saying that if you don't have an espresso machine, nobody's coming to your booth, which is so funny.
That's why I went to a few.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And it's strong.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Yeah. But I did run into Venkat Tumala, and I saw him today. So that was one familiar face. And that's been pretty much it. I know Dan Z's here.
Saw him.
I think Gloria Salazar. Oh, you saw Dan? Oh, great. Yeah, so I still want to see some people. And then there's some European docs that I really want to meet while I'm here as well. So, but yeah, we still got 2 more days of it, and we thought it'd be a great place to record since we both knew we were going to be here. Yeah. And we found this. We're at the Hotel Neri, which has been amazing. Yeah. It was a great suggestion. We're in the Gothic quarter.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. You can see there's this slender little street, so the audience can probably see a little bit of people walking by outside. The big cathedral's right around the corner.
Yeah.
And so this is a great spot. I'm glad you picked it and suggested it to me. So let's jump into the topic for today. Why talk about staff culture? Why do you think it's important?
That's a good one. I think it's one of those sort of the soft subjects of IR and what we do, but I think it's extraordinarily important because it has all kinds of ramifications of how you're taking care of patients, how your practice evolves, how it is successful or not successful, how you can retain, how you can hire. It's super important, and I think it's something that as physicians really don't get any exposure to really during training, other than the sort of innate leadership that we see from our attendings, and other hospital leaders throughout our hospital training. And some of that's pretty toxic, actually. So I think we probably all a lot of us come out pretty broken people, and understanding how to even lead a a department.
Yeah.
You graduate fellowship and now you arrive, maybe if you're a hospital-based doc, now the OBL is a different story maybe, but in the same way, we kind of come out and we're now expected to be leaders of those departments.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have never had any kind of training other than our role models, which could have been good or bad.
Right, exactly. We're kind of like kids going through training, like you're impressionable, right?
Yeah.
And so you see people getting abused left and right. That becomes like normal. And it's a shame. Like you can see like a normal like a outside the lab being a normal person treating people horribly. You're like, what is going on? And a lot of times it's learned behavior, right, from their training. And so I do think it's incredibly important. In fact, like for just having briefly been out, on my own, it's really like a linchpin in terms of hiring and retaining people. Right. Yeah. And I've seen people I've hired people that have come from labs where the culture was horrible and they just were, it's a turnstile. They just kept losing people. And so what I wanted to talk to you about, so we kind of talked about where does it start? It starts from the top, most likely. Right. Where have you seen examples of where it starts from the top and it's really good? Like, can you think of examples, like whether your current job or a prior job or training?
Yeah, I just always, I think it's Michael Scott. I think it starts at the top with Michael Scott. No, I mean, I think part of I was fortunate actually to come out, through training with John Kaufman, because I think he's a fantastic leader. I think he thinks carefully and thoughtfully about the department, how he wanted the Daughter Institute to go. Obviously, it had its own culture, but he was also integral in actually creating a kind of a new modern, culture for the Daughter Institute, which I was part of.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the better role models that I have. And I think it definitely starts at the top. If you look at like the former CEO of Best Buy, Hubert Jolly, he said that leadership is less than about being the smartest person in the room, but more about creating an environment that enables the purpose and the strategy of your institution to come to life. Yeah. And I think that where we often go wrong is not necessarily just in creating a toxic environment. Is I think the thing that I've seen in my practice where it's more commonly just a passivity that we take to creating culture or letting whatever's been there continue. Yeah. Because I think it takes a lot of work. We're concentrating on taking care of patients safely and adequately and building the practice, and we're doing all these other sort of clinical duties. But I think the default for a lot of us is to be passive. Yeah. When we come into a new department, we walk into the hospital and say, hey, I'm here to do the cases and I'm here to take care of patients. And you just sort of, if you're passive, then you just absorb whatever culture is there. And it may be toxic, it may be not, but it may be stagnant. Yeah. Which is probably even in some ways also pretty bad.
Yeah, because it's uninspiring, I guess.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like people are dragging their feet to get to work. They're running late. Like nobody's excited. And honestly, I think patients feel that energy, right?
Yeah, totally.
When somebody's just, it's at the end of the day, it's like customer service too, right? When they're in pre-op, post-op, like you got to put on a smiley face because they're way more stressed out and anxious than you are. Totally. They're having the procedure done and you kind of have to be there for them with some support. And so your staff does too, right? And
absolutely.
So how do you inspire,
I know, right? I mean, I think a lot of it just comes into your attitude when you come into work. I mean, I think over time, the culture is really shaped by these small moments. It's like in your relationship with my wife or my kids, like, it's not showing up to the big events like, the birthday parties or the games, the soccer games, whatever. It's actually the day-to-day, like, am I kind? Am I gentle? Am I caring, compassionate? Am I friendly? Am I smiling? Right. Am I laughing? Those sort of things over time add up. They're subtle, but they're probably the glue that holds it all together. Yeah. That's something I learned as a parent, but I think it's also something that, is really applicable to this sort of situation. Yeah. When I can definitely tell, like when I'm tired, or I come to work and I'm not smiling and that sort of thing. I mean, it definitely sets the mood, I think, for the rest of the people.
Yeah.
And so you try to minimize those days, for sure.
Right. And it sets the mood for a case, and it could actually even sabotage a case.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think there was a study that I came across recently. It was published in 2014 by these people, Barsad and O'Neill, and it was kind of one of those academic, journal studies about workplace environments and whatnot. And they actually studied about 300 employees and patients and family members of like this long-term care facility back east. And they found that actually there were better patient outcomes, fewer ER trips, better patient satisfaction, when the staff actually felt engaged and worth something when they came to work, like they were working for a compassionate, loving, sort of caring environment.
Yeah.
If the people who had negative feelings toward their work, it actually translated into worse patient care,
Yeah,
so,
that makes sense, right?
Yeah, so it's huge. So I think your outcomes are going to be better if you know how to lead your department and help foster a good culture.
Yeah, I think negative energy is like way more contagious than positive energy for some reason. And it'll spread quickly throughout a day even.
For sure.
And so who do you think should quarterback? I mean, we say it starts from the top, but let's say the top is not like living up to the expectations, or they're not showing up right in terms of the culture. They're not creating a good culture. What can it be anybody? Could it be the MA? Could it be the office manager who kind of quarterbacks staff culture? Have you seen cases where like that really helps?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, we often as physicians, we work in different environments. So that's another thing we're not really talking about is that, well, geez, I work at 4 different hospitals, and I'm stepping into a new culture each new place. And where I have my main hospital, but my other partners are setting up their own, sort of departments and culture in that's another level of cultural sort of development, right, with my partners. In my practice. So not just my practice, but also the IR section. Right. So the practice and, and then there's like the hospital culture, because sometimes like in some hospitals I've worked at, like the hospital culture is terrible. Yeah. And it has, there's nothing I can do about that. Like, cause like the hospital is just toxic, and people don't want to be there, and it's just, and patient outcomes.
Right. Not so great.
May have been not so great, and there are these little subtle things, but I think they add up. So I do think it starts at the top. Most CEOs would tell you, when you read the Harvard Business Review, which I look at a lot through my leadership training I've had at the hospitals, they will tell you that it starts at the top. But I think you can kind of almost not weaponize, but you can mobilize other people that are energetic, outgoing, that have a passion for it, like maybe your lead nurse or lead tech. Yeah. Could be anyone, but it's also not just your individual department, right? As hospital docs, like we have patient interactions with the schedulers, to the front office, to the registration people in the hospital, and these are not our employees. Yeah. So how do you create your brand, your culture, when these people may not even ever step inside your department, but they're patient facing, often the first people that they see. That's true. Yeah. There's some hospital, and I have a similar practice set up as you, where I'm covering 4 different hospitals, and I'm at a different hospital every week. And it's like, you're totally right. Every hospital has its own culture, and when you like the next time I show up at like say one hospital and it's all new nurses and techs, it's like, okay, something's wrong here. Like something, and what can I do? That's like that rotating doc to come in and be like, hey, let's create a sustainable environment, because with COVID, travel nursing became hot, right? Partly because of the pay, but also because people are just burnt out. Right. And now we're kind of this post-COVID stage where I'd like to see some retention in these hospitals. And like, what do you think? Yeah. Like for me, like asking you, like, what can I do as a rotating doc to kind of assist with that, even though I'm not there all the time. You know what I mean? It's really, I think it's really hard. I mean, I think That's why I think that's, in our group, we learned many years ago that really having a physician champion at each hospital is like key, and obviously that can't happen in every case, but that's the ideal, to have a physician dedicated to that one hospital that's really leading that and able to, because I think if you're in and out, it's really hard. You can just kind of be kind and, help steer people the right way, I guess.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's a tough situation. But I do think that, aligning yourself with good leaders at the hospital level and admin is important too, that your staff understands, their sort of role in the bigger hospital, and that they feel like they're, well taken care of. And in fact, like in my main hospital, we had like hardly anybody leave throughout the whole pandemic, even though they could have been paid more by traveling or going elsewhere to do, locums work and they told us that they really like working there, and they like the mission, and they feel supported by the hospital and me and the department. So retention is huge, especially with COVID.
Right. That is huge.
What we're dealing with.
You guys were able to hold on to them.
Yeah. So retention and hiring, two separate but relatable things. But I think the more you can retain, the less you have to hire, which makes it even easier. It's like this, treadmill.
Yeah. And people aren't stupid. I mean, if they're like, most people research their jobs, and if they hear, and so, especially within a city, people talk, and if they hear that, that's
right,
like, the manager's wacko, don't go there, like that. News travels fast.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about, because I kind of want to talk about like bad players. So like things that are, like for example, we have these hospitals, sometimes there's a bad player that we can't fire because they're not our employee.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that? And do you guys, my question before that is, do you guys have a set of core values as a group, and that you guys like hire and fire by, like in terms of, for physicians?
No. Boy, it's interesting. We do have core values. I think my group probably does a bad job of reiterating those, because I think you have to come back to them. You have to reiterate them every time someone's hired. You have to express them every year at least. In some way or fashion at your annual meeting or whatever, I think you have to rehash those. And I think that's one thing that my group, we have a really good culture, we have good retention, but I think that that's one area that we're a little lacking. And years ago, we went through like this whole board meeting retreat thing where we lined out our core values, all that.
That's usually when they come up at retreats.
Exactly. And you're like, the next week, we're like, now what do we do? What was that?
Right.
But I think that that's probably, again, a failure on some part of my group's leadership, is that we don't get that back in front of people, because I think it's important, especially now with COVID and radiology groups, where a lot of your diagnostic colleagues are at home. Yeah. And we're talking about like combined groups here right now. I also work in an OBL, of course, and that's a bit of a different situation where we're the bosses, and we have our employees. But if you're talking about physician culture and group, it's pretty important, I think, to get those values back in front of people consistently and repetitively, really, because you got to get it back in your mind. Because if you look at the successful CEOs of like Starbucks, whatever X successful company, they're going to have that in front of people every time they get hired. And, they're just reminding people of those core values.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And where I think hospitals get it wrong is they'll put them up on a plaque when you walk in the door, but like they're always just kind of like phony values that it's like it's for marketing for the patients to see when they walk in. Yeah. But I've never heard anybody at a meeting. I mean, I don't go to a lot of hospital meetings anymore, but like I've never heard anybody bring up their core company, core values in the hospital. Right. And I wish there was more of that. Yeah. Because I see that a lot in the startup world. Like, every startup book I read, like it's all about core values and like that, cohesion with your company is around that. And so I would just like to see more of that in medicine. You know what I mean?
Totally. Like my main hospital, I think one of the reasons why I really like working there is that the CEO and the hospital leadership from, the C-suite, they have like created like this myth about how amazing this hospital is, and like how great it is to work there, and how good, like how excellent the quality is of the care we're providing our patients. And that like it's like marketing, but it's like internal marketing where it's almost like this, it's like a myth, and like, if you say it, you hear it enough.
It's like propaganda.
But if you say it or hear enough, people start believing it. All of a sudden they look around like, damn, we're an awesome hospital. And people want to work here, and they have good retention, and the nursing staff is amazing, and the doc staff, the physician staff is fantastic. Yeah. So I think there's a little bit of that like propaganda machine, that you have to repeat those core values. Yeah. And you kind of have to talk yourself up to your own people, and remind people how great you are. Yeah. Because I think it's easy to focus on the negatives, the places where you have work to do. Yeah. But I don't know. I like the idea of mythology and like how that can be incorporated into a company culture,
That's a good point. So like our top core value at BackTable is no assholes, right? So I love it because Tony Fadell wrote a book that I read recently called Build, and he had a whole chapter on assholes. And I don't know if you've read that book. So
he's with Apple.
What's that? He was at Apple. He helped
the iPod, right?
The iPod, and then the iPad and iPhone, and then he started Nest. Right. He created Nest and then sold to Google. And it's a great book because he basically writes the blueprint for any startup, and any it don't even have to be a company. It could be a product. Right. And he talks about that. And, he's like, look, sometimes I'm an asshole, but I'm an asshole in a good way. Like I'm an asshole towards progress. Right. And I'm not trying to create a culture where that's all about tearing people down. So you have different types of asshole. And so I love the chapter because he kind of breaks it down, the different types. And there's assholes you got to get rid of, right? And so I've kind of, we said no assholes, but I kind of agree with what he's saying. Like sometimes you just got to be stern to reach your goals, right? Yeah. And in the hospital, shit happens, right? Right, yeah. Like bad things happen in the lab, and it's, you got to look past whose fault it is and just take care of the patient. Right. And sometimes that includes being an asshole. Right. Yeah. To make things happen fast. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I
like that. I got to read that.
Perceived as an asshole.
I got to read that chapter because I think there is, it's kind of like there's a place for like anger or righteous anger. Like if something is seriously happening, it's like, I don't know if you read the Bible, but like Jesus, everybody thinks of him as buddy Jesus, but like there were times where he got really pissed off, like at the the people selling things in the temple and whatnot. He's like, this is bullshit, you got to tear up tables and turn them over. He's like throwing money everywhere. He's like, this is bullshit, So I think I think that there's room for that like righteous anger or I think when something's going down wrong, and I'm not saying you need to yell at someone, but I think that there's a room for being stern and right and all that. There's a place for that, but it's very limited.
Right. Yeah, and very it's all about the pattern of behavior.
Yeah. Right. Yeah,
that's not an everyday event. You hope
it shouldn't be. Yeah, there are a lot of problems if that's every day. But you also are talking about like how do you get rid of them? But I like part of it is like maybe how do you identify them? Right. And part of that is part of the hiring process. However, we're not in the direct hiring process or pathway for a lot of these nurses and techs that we work with, right? So sometimes they could sneak in and get hired. Fortunately, it's rare for us, but I've gone through some leadership training. Really, you try to rehabilitate them based on your core values, and you try to bring them along. But you kind of give them a time. You have to give them there's a timeline, document everything really well, and then at some point it's just got to part ways. Because if you leave those toxic people and you try to placate them or just deal with it, and it's like just, a cancer it's a cancer. It's just gonna make everything worse, and then then it's gonna change your culture from the inside. And everything you've been working for is
before you know it, everybody quits. Especially if that person's in a manager role. Right. it was fun. We were talking about Team America last night. Remember that scene in Team America? It's a little too vulgar for this podcast, but if anybody's interested, Team America is a good reference about assholes. So
it's true.
How does one? So we were just kind of talking a little bit about it, like getting rid of assholes. You know, I think personality tests are super interesting for hiring.
Yeah.
You know, and now granted, they can be expensive and time consuming, but I think that there's, especially at the level of physician hiring, I think personality tests to see if you mesh well with everybody else that's there is worthwhile, but I don't see much of that.
No, I don't.
You know?
I mean, I'm really glad you brought that up because I mean, I'm a big believer in like, you know, I think the Myers-Briggs thing is helpful. My wife also showed me the Enneagram thing. Have you ever heard about the Enneagram? It's this whole other way of like how people are born, and they have these innate abilities, you know, and personalities and gifts and struggle areas, you know. And so it's another kind of Myers-Briggs-ish, but it's a different way of looking at it. And but it's ancient. Yeah, it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. So I think pick whatever tool you want, but I think that's an area that we could really improve on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes it's just like, let's just fill the spot. Any warm body, let's get them in here. They can cover call, perfect. And it's, you know, it's not ideal, but so like these are kind of things we're talking about, like in, you know, ways we can improve staff culture is just like paying attention to these things when you hire them, asking the right questions, doing your due diligence. But a lot of times we just get in a rush and we just want to get people in. But once they're in, once you have your staff, what are kinds of things that you've seen have worked for staff culture, and how you mentioned like the retreat, right? Yeah. Do retreats do much? Or are they just kind of like a formality? Like, you know what I mean?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's like showing up for the birthday party and expecting, you know, you have a great relationship with your kid.
Sorry, everybody. Oh,
it is. He's pouring water. I promise. It's not.
This is not the urology show.
That's right. But, you know, so I think, retreats are fine. The team building exercises and stuff, I think are fine. But it's a little bit like resilience training. I don't think it's going to be like the answer to the problem that you're having. It's all these all these minute things, smiling when you show up to work, asking how your techs are doing. I mean, like, this is kind of self-defeating, I guess, in a way, but I'll give you an example. And I even read in the Harvard Business Review, there was a CEO, it was talking about like how if you create a culture in your business or your group that prioritizes like career growth and mobility, it actually, it may lose you some employees over time, but it's like very empowering for people, and they like coming to work when they have a sense of mastery and they're getting better at something, and they are encouraged to go do something else, or to go back to school to do something else. So like, for example, like my best tech ever in the world, he and I asked him out to dinner one time because I'm like, hey, you know, Ivan, like you're a fantastic tech and you are a good friend and I want to support you in anything I can do. I think you'd be great to go to med school or PA school or whatever. I think you got a lot of potential, and you know, I'm gonna write you a recommendation. I'll make calls, whatever you want. You know, I could help you if you're not happy and fulfilled here, and so eventually he ended up going to industry. So after a couple years later, and I think ultimately he's happy. He is happy, and he's doing a great job where he is. And he's fantastic at that. Right. But he's also making more money, and he's able to provide for his family easier.
Immediately versus 8 years later.
Right, exactly. Because at that time he's like, I can't really take time off. I got to work and support my family and kids and stuff, and I can't go back to school. I just can't afford that. So I use that as an example. Kind of ate me, you know, it kind of ended up biting me. But I think that's the selfless part of like what we do as leaders, is that we do have to build people up. Like I think if you expect everything to stay static and the same, and you know, and not evolve, I think you're doing your staff and maybe even ultimately your patients a disservice, right? Because you have to continually getting better and changing. Even if it means leaving something behind, you know, it might have been great.
Right.
So
Yeah, like basically setting people up for personal growth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. We had another one go to PA school too, before him. So, and I was writing recommendations, I mean, so I think that's part of it. I mean, as being a mentor and a role model, right? And then you got to replace them, but then you're also in an area where you're like, I know what I need to replace this person with.
Right.
I know the right kind of person to be looking for. If you can get it, then you're not going backwards.
Right. And, we're not in academics, so that time course is actually longer than training residents or med students, which is, because that's why I could never do academics. Like, it's so frustrating to just watch people get good and then they're out the door and then you got to start over again as a teacher.
It's hard.
I don't know if I don't know. My wife is in academics and like, she loves that. I'm like, I don't know. It's just
it's like rebirth and renewal, like every year. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I'm more of a long game kind of guy.
Yeah.
The slow burn.
That's right. So do you guys do anything? You mentioned like, it's the everyday stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like my dad was in sales and he was a yearbook salesman, and everybody loved him because every time he showed up, he brought everybody pizza. And like, it ate into his bottom line, but like he was the pizza guy. And, I just, because I eventually was on the yearbook committee and I saw the students, how they get excited when my dad would show up. And I was like, it's just pizza, but, and it's my dad. So of course I'm not, giving him credit for a good job, but he, that was like the culture he created. Right. And so, but people didn't get like entitled. Like if he showed up and he didn't have a pizza, it's not like people were upset. Going back to Tony Fidel's book, he has a chapter called "Fuck Free Massages," because he was saying that's the part of the problem with the culture at some of these big companies like Google and Apple, where the people become entitled because they get so much free stuff, right? Like every meal's paid for and everything, and then there's this like, entitlement culture, and I don't think that kind of happens with device, right? I've heard that with techs. And nurses complain like, oh, well, they don't even bring us anything.
Right, yeah.
And it seems like they prefer certain companies that do bring stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't like that aspect of it.
Either,
And I was curious to know what your take is on it.
I think the element of surprise and spontaneity is huge. Like I ride my bike to work, and occasionally I'll bring bagels, and and they're like, "How'd you carry these bagels?" And like cream cheese on your bike. I'm like, I'm riding no hands. Like like there's a bagel shop right close to the hospital, which is good.
Yeah.
But so I mean that's spontaneous. Like it's a surprise.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah.
I think if it's every Friday is Bagel Friday, then it's like it becomes
whatever's the bagels at.
Where are the bagels? I hate it. Why do you bring bagels? So I think it's spontaneity. I think I don't make our reps. I don't feel like they're caterers. I think it's nice for them to support the staff with free food. Occasionally, not going to make them do it to come in the lab, but they kind of know that I don't know. What is it? We don't have a policy, but every third visit or fifth visit, whatever, that they should bring something for us, for the staff. Cause I think if it's not, expected, then it's special or more special. And then I think it's there, you don't get into that entitlement thing. I think another thing we do is we also have, every staff's birthday is known. It's on a calendar. We have a birthday calendar, and then so there's always a card, and there's always like a potluck. There's always like cakes or cookies and stuff like that. And so I think that's also something, because I think people want to be known. They want to be special, cared for.
Right.
And that kind of goes back to creating a compassionate culture that we were talking about earlier. If you just come in, say hi, and then get to work and you go home and there's no relationship there, then I think the people are going to leave. I think I like to know my staff and my patients too. Like I ask them where they're from and what kind of music you like to listen to, whatever,
Yeah.
Like I get to let them choose like what music they want to listen to, patients or the staff,
You're like, which of my mixes do you like best?
Which BackTable, that's right.
Yeah.
Which BackTable mix do you
that's
like?
Right.
Yeah, one or three. Grunge?
Right.
Americana?
You did. Yeah. Americana. So it's like folk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of my least. I loved your grunge one though.
Yeah, I know
The
you
grunge
did.
was
I
good,
made
yeah.
that for you.
Yeah, that's my sweet spot.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
90s grunge.
Yeah, and I think I made the EDM one for Sabine.
Oh yes, yeah, that was good too. I'm not usually into EDM, but I really like that one. I like to read diagnostic to that.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, it's
like,
good. It's good
yeah.
for that. I've got a good jazz one. I'll got to get out to you.
Yeah.
No Kenny G though. Don't worry.
The birthday thing's funny because it like almost depends on how many people you have in the company.
Yeah.
Because if you only have like 5, that's great. Yeah. Like once every couple of months you have a birthday cake and you celebrate. If you have 1,000 people, then every day is somebody's birthday, right? Statistically. And so, or multiple people's birthdays. Right. And so somebody else was making that point in a book. They're like, you got to get rid of the birthday thing at some point when your company's that size. Otherwise people spend 2 hours at lunch and you're spending all this money on cake and, presents.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was, I do think it's super important to make them feel like they're cared for. Right. And that's the whole point.
Right.
And again, it goes back to like we were saying with the kids, it's the same thing with entitlement. If they expect dessert every single night, then ice cream's not as special, and they expect it. And so, I just think it's a balance, right?
Right.
Just like anything else.
I mean, maybe we should be doing stuff like taking some cues from Severance. Have you seen the new series?
No,
Severance?
I need to watch
It's
that.
so good.
Yeah.
But they do this thing called like the waffle party, and then there's like this weird jazz party thing. You know,
Have you seen it?
Kieran, you know what I'm talking about. It's so good, but they're so random, but they're like kind of achievement things, that people really look forward to, and they sound silly, but anyway, great show, by the way.
Yeah, I saw the first couple. Yeah, Adam Scott's great. I love Adam Scott.
Yeah, brilliant.
I saw the first couple, and I have to jump into it. We got sidetracked with Loot.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, but I think we've covered good cultures, and sort of like how to provide a good, healthy culture. Mm-hmm. Any other examples that you've seen, like with big companies? I watched. Speaking of shows, We Crashed, right? Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, like horrible
I
company
know
culture.
all about that guy.
Yeah, horrible company culture.
Yeah.
Same with the Uber one. Yeah, Super Pumped.
Yeah.
Again, just they were hiring assholes on purpose because that's what they wanted. As part of their culture, because it was all about driving, and you look at stuff like Wolf of Wall Street, and you can make a lot of money really fast, but there's no sustainability, right? That's sort of the moral of the story,
right? For sure.
And so any other examples you can think of, like in terms of good culture?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think Tony Fadell. I mean, you look at those examples of Apple, Steve Jobs. I mean, certainly.
His moments.
I don't think he was a compassion. I mean, his compassion wasn't like something that was characteristic of him, but I think he's very passionate about purpose and excellence. So I mean, I think it depends on the culture you create. Has to, it can be like a driver of your mission and your purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to work for Steve Jobs as a doc.
Right.
Right. But I mean, I think we can take pieces of his leadership style and like use them. But I don't know. I mean, I think that maybe I think a lot of it may be just homegrown. I mean, that's what I think the beauty of it is because it's customizable. It's plastic. It's malleable to whatever situation and cultural milieu you're in. Because a hospital department in Denver.
Yeah.
And my hospital is different than a hospital culture, at another hospital in Denver, and way different than maybe something on the East Coast,
right,
or West Coast, or probably more West Coast than East Coast for sure, right? Yeah. But I mean, and so I don't know. I don't think there's one ultimate thing to look up to, but I think it's interesting because I think the culture that we create, it extends beyond our little. Our procedure rooms and our recovery areas, totally. It's schedulers all the way through us and our clinical area, all the way to the billing, from our companies and the experience that patients have with our billing people. Yeah. I mean, some of the worst reviews I've seen on Google are always around billing things. And if you Google any radiology group in like Colorado, they are like 1 stars because it's
Yeah.
all billing issues.
Yeah.
And like, is that how we want to be taking care of our patients? Like,
Right.
you know, and no, and it's often people that we hire, you know, that aren't necessarily even our employees again, but it looks, you know,
Yes.
it creates
It
a
might even be
negative-
outsourced, but all they
Exactly,
see is,
right.
well, you
Right,
screwed me on the
right.
bill.
And my group's name is on the bill, right?
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's just a miscommunication. It's not,
Yeah.
but if you don't nip that in the bud and have good follow-up
Right.
and taking care of the patient, then it can be seen as like a toxic or a negative, you know, patient experience.
It's literally every touch
huge.
point
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
patient you have to like, look at, right?
Right.
And because again, at the end of the day, like, why do we have ratings reviews? Because it's a business,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's customer service, and
Right.
you know, and there's, especially in the city, there's, you know. Oh,
Yeah, I
there was
would
one
just-
other thing you wanted to talk about was how do you find information or resources?
Yeah, thanks. I was just gonna say, actually, the HBR, so Harvard Business Review, absolutely fantastic. Just go on the website. There is a subscription that you can access certain articles, but a lot of the articles on the website are free.
Yeah.
And there's just endless amounts of information about how to lead create culture, how to be a leader. And also a lot of hospitals, I've gone through 2 leadership programs in different hospitals that I work at. So a lot of hospital admins are wanting to tag physician leaders that they can kind of help go through training, and you know, which is a lot of information from HBR and stuff. So so those classes are really good. If you know, talk to your CMO, those C-suite folks would know how to get in touch with that. Like I work for a couple, Health One, which is a subsidiary of Healthcare Corporation of America, which makes me cringe when I say corporation with healthcare. But HCA is really good in the sense of like how they develop their physician leaders. They've got a lot of programs that you can go through, and I think these were like 6-month-long programs that like weekly, you know, study sessions and like materials and practice, you know, leading and dealing with situations with toxic people, how to create culture and all that. So it's very helpful. Yeah. So I think a lot of hospital systems have that kind of stuff, but we don't, radiology, we're not aware of that.
Yeah. I didn't, you know, it's funny, those leadership courses, I never thought about that. Like that would be part of the curriculum, would be talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Staff culture and help, you know, because I don't know, I guess I'd never taken one of those courses. So I didn't really know what to expect, but that's good feedback, because I hear about people taking them. But I don't really know what you do with them. I guess you learn stuff, nuggets like that, right?
Well, I had to do 2 of them. I guess I failed the first one.
Yeah. Why did that happen? Oh, just because they were like, no.
I'm just saying. No, just kidding. So
They're like, you need some more work on this.
you suck. You can do a podcast, but you really suck.
Oh, man.
Anyway, it's good to talk to you, man.
Yeah, man. It's good to hang out.
Yeah.
Like, this is such a cool town. And even this hotel is cool, and everything about it. And, you know, what do you got planned the rest of the week?
Well, wife and I went to Park Güell today, which is one of Gaudi's outdoor masterpieces.
Okay.
Super interesting park, wonky architecture and infrastructure that he built for that park, which is a whole interesting thing. If you look at leadership and bad business ventures, that's a whole study in bad business, because that was supposed to be like a neighborhood where the guy who owned the mountain, who bought the mountain, Güell was his name, like he completely misread the market and just completely torpedoed any kind of business that he had. He had all kinds of aspirations of selling off plots of land up there, and it was not ever supposed to be a public park. It was supposed to be this exclusive area, and then he never could sell any lots because it was too far from downtown and all this stuff. So anyway, so it's very interesting. And then we're going to do Sagrada Familia tomorrow, and then just get lost again in the Gothic Quarter, which is very easy to do.
Yeah. Lots of
These narrow streets.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. And then do some more CIRSE.
Yeah. CIRSE has been great to see. You know, I think I told you, and I told the audience this, that like part of the reason why we're living in Paris is to help kind of expand BackTable within the vascular interventional community in Europe.
Right.
And what I realized walking through the exhibitors hall is we got a lot of work to do, because we're not as, people aren't as aware of BackTable or even just podcasting. I just was picking people's brains about podcasting, and it seems like hasn't caught on quite as much as it has in the US. So, so yeah, I'm up for the challenge,
huge opportunity. I think for BackTable.
This is one of our first ones from Europe. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hopefully we'll be
happy to be here.
Soon. Yeah. All right, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ben.